Hello, Heathens! I'm Megan Angus, and this is Spinning the Wheel Podcast. In this weekly audio ritual, we explore the 8 seasons of the Witch's Wheel of the Year, and we discover how it is so much more than 8 Sabbats. We weirding witches time travel through holy days, festivals, and celestial events connecting our celebrations and magic to the past, present, and future. Our cackling fills the night as we take our turn gathering the wool, wielding the distaff, and spinning the wheel. Hello, Heathens, and happy Lughnasadh, happy Lammas, blessed Sabbath. Thank you for joining me this week. Today, well, August 1st, I don't know when you're listening to this, is Lughnasadh. So how very cool that our lunar pattern is matching up with our Sabbath this week. Pretty auspicious. I know I've also been coming at you fast and furious this week with a bunch of different podcasts. Here's number 3. And so, because of that, this podcast is also going to be a little bit shorter than usual because a lot of the stuff that I would be talking about in this podcast, I just talked about in the Lughnasadh class, which is now up free to watch on YouTube as well as most podcast platforms. You can either watch it or listen to it. Thanks to the generous support of my incredibly fabulous and completely ridiculous patrons. Thanks, guys. You did this. um, and so the fact that you all can go watch that video for free, that's thanks to them. And this is where we are. We are in the abundance. We are in the moment of the first harvest. So if you have not watched that class, stop this podcast and go watch that class over on YouTube, get caught up, and then come back here. We're going to talk about the astrology of this week, our lunar work for this week, and a few of the holy days that are happening this week that we didn't have time to cover in detail in the class. So Lughnasadh or Lughnasadh, Lammas up on YouTube. Go check it out. Okay. So let us get grounded into our Lughnasadh work. Actually, let me do this first. This is Lughnasadh season, full moon in Aquarius, lunar week 18 by some lunar calendars, not all. And what are we working with when we are here in Lughnasadh season? Well, I put up a big piece for patrons when the sun entered Leo to kind of get us grounded into what this energy is. But we are here in the very heart of summer. We are in Leo season, and we are in Lughnasadh or Lughnasadh or Lammas season officially. And our big themes, the big themes of our witches' work that we are centered in or grounding into for this Sabbath are power, maturation, leadership, and production. And we can break that down further into things like competition, personal power, the fruits of our labor, performance, strength, wisdom, sacrifice, and taking the best. And as I just mentioned, we break this stuff down even further in the 2-hour class that I just put up on YouTube. So if you want to dig in even further, as I said, stop this podcast, go watch that, and come back. So we are going to be exploring what these themes can mean for us and what they might mean for our community over the next 6 to 8-ish weeks of Lughnasadh season. And we're going to be wrangling with this stuff, working with it, considering it, pondering it, struggling with it at times. There is a deep resonance in the totality of Lughnasadh season around competition. and power and the wielding of power. And so that conversation kind of threads throughout the work that we do at this time of year. As well, there is a deep conversation around the results of our efforts, the harvest that we are able to pull in from our work that we have done so far this year. However, it is that you mark the start of a year, this is the results of that. Or perhaps this is marking the very end of a year and the beginning of a new year for you, as we will discuss to be true for some cultures this week with this full moon that we have this week. Before we get into all that, let's talk about this full moon. So, our week starts officially lunar wise, Tuesday, August 1st, 2023 at 11:31 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day / the next day for everybody else around the planet. We have a full Sturgeon moon in Aquarius at 9 degrees. Now, some sources are saying that this is a super moon, and sure, technically we could refer to this as a supermoon. I prefer to think of only the largest moon of the year as the supermoon, not all of the moons that are kind of bigger. And our next full moon, a month from now, in my opinion, well, it's not my opinion, it's science, is actually our largest moon. So that is the moon that I'm referring to as the supermoon. But other folks aren't necessarily wrong. So maybe it's a super full moon for you. Maybe it's just especially full. And this moon is square Jupiter at 13 degrees of Taurus. So let's break down all of this stuff. First and foremost, this is a full moon. And so in our lunar process, that we talk about every week, this is the moment of the lunar process where a fruit appears on the vine. How appropriate, right? Kicking off Lughnasadh season with the appearance of the fruit. And that, leads to the harvest, right? Which we will have later in our lunar week. We'll talk about it. But the full moon is the moment in our lunar process where we begin to see the results of our work. We aren't necessarily ready to harvest them just yet. We will be in a few days. But this is that moment where it's like, aha, the results of my actions. Here they are. And results can be, awesome. They can be consequences, right? They can be all kinds of things. So it really depends on what have we been putting energy into to determine what is it that we're going to start to get out of our systems. This moon is ruled by Uranus in Taurus, which is interesting because last week's moon was also ruled by a planet in an earth sign. So this portion of the year really is emphasizing results, right? Stuff in the real world, stuff in the physical world, the material plane, showing us the evidence of our work. So, what are we doing with a full moon in Aquarius? Well, as we learned in class, and this is in the workbook for this class, the full moon in Aquarius is the moment where we head backstage for the after party. We go and we celebrate our friendships. We celebrate our alliances and our cohorts and our allegiances. We strengthen the bonds between us and our friends, us and our family members, us and our community at large. And we consider the influence and the importance of our friendships and our social connections. What is it to be a good friend? What is it to be a good community member? What is it to be a good ally? These are the things that we might be pondering or witnessing in our life or in the people in our lives on a Aquarius full moon. Aquarius is all about society at large. It's about our social group at large. And this is a moment to ponder, what are my connections to that stuff, and how do those connections influence me, and how do I influence others through those connections? What's that all about? Very appropriate for those of us here in the northern hemisphere, because it's summertime for us, and so it's hot. The nights are short, the days are long, and lots of people are out partying and hanging out with each other. There's lots of backyard hangs and fire pit hangs and at the park hangs and all of that good stuff happening at this time. So it makes a lot of sense for us. Um, and that's kind of really all I have to say about it. Like, wait a minute, but there was a square from Jupiter. Yep, it's fantastic. When we're hanging out with the planet Jupiter, even squares and oppositions are relatively easy and benevolent and beneficial. A square from the moon to Jupiter brings us into maybe a little bit more of a philosophical attitude. We might be pondering, the existential elements of things a little bit more, and like wanting to talk about that with other people. And we might find that our, backyard hangs around the fire pit, swilling some beer with friends, also has a little bit of a spiritual element to it, and that people are getting a little philosophical, a little esoteric about their stuff. If there's anything funky about it, because, it's a square, so sometimes it'll bring up some friction for us, we might find ourselves or other people getting a little long-winded about things or a little dogmatic about things. But for the most part, this really facilitates friendliness, open joy, and a very expansive and optimistic attitude about your belief systems and my belief systems and the potentials of where we could all go, if we were living more, spiritual lives, and maybe, approaching reality from a more philosophical bend. It really is quite lovely. That's all I have to say about this moon. It's nice. Enjoy it. We've had 2 weeks of relatively funky astrology. And if it wasn't funky for you personally, it was certainly funky out on the world stage. We've lost two really incredible people from the entertainment world. Sinead O'Connor passed on, and Pee Wee Herman, Paul Rubens has just passed on as well. Fuck cancer officially. And so this is also a great time to celebrate those folks who have taken those leadership roles. As we talk about a lot in the Lughnasadh class, this is a time for honoring our ancestors who have sacrificed for us and, moved on before we did, and the things that we've learned from them and the ways that they helped us and all of that stuff. So that. So we've had 2 weeks of really crappy astrology, so it's really nice to have a week that's starting off with just a, hey, hell yeah, let's all hang out and have a nice time kind of a moon. It's about time, honestly. It's about goddamn time. Okay, so for our lunar body work, we are resting, relaxing, nourishing, supporting, or otherwise restoring the legs, especially the knees and the ankles. These are the parts of the body that are ruled by Aquarius. So, yes, going and getting that lower body massage or the foot rub, or the soak at the hot tub, very holy acts this week, 100%. And for our plant body work, we are pulling weeds. We are cutting trees specifically for firewood or lumber. We might be doing some plowing, cultivating, pruning trees and vines, doing some pest or disease control. And we are harvesting our below ground crops for drying and storage. And this is also still a really great week for planting biennials, perennials, bulbs, roots, trees, grapes, berries, potatoes, and shrubs. Although I know it's getting a little late in the season to plant some of those things. This is, again, only the first harvest, and we've got several weeks to go of the hot portion of the growing season. So we've still got a lot of work to do out there in the yard. And if you are a person who doesn't have an outdoor space, this all still applies for your plants inside. This is a great week for pruning your plants, um, but also cultivating and taking some trimmings to be grown later, etc., etc. And let me also mention about the lunar body work. I mention this every week, but if you're new here, I am not a doctor of the human corpus. I am a doctor of the cauldron and witchery and woo. So I don't know jack shit about you taking care of your physical health. Don't listen to me, some lady yelling on the internet. Go check in with your trusted health advisor to make sure that this information is appropriate for you to work with. And I also always encourage work with the metaphor. So, is there something that you've been walking through and you maybe need to take a little rest from that? Is there something that has had you on your knees, metaphorically speaking, and that's, maybe it's been great or maybe it hasn't been great, and do you need to do a little recuperation from that? Uh-huh, okay. All right. So moving on to the astrology of this week, and the astrology of this day. First off, I want to say this. We are stepping into a very interesting month astrologically. There's some cool stuff. There's some funky stuff. So that's pretty normal, right? We got a grab bag, a little mixed bag of cool and not so cool. But the interesting part is, well, one of the interesting things about August is we only have 13 transits this month. That is a very small number of transits. And and so first off, that's unusual. Normally we have many, many more transits in a month. One. Two, uh, the effect of this is that the transits that are happening in the sky that apply to everyone may be a little bit louder for you this month than they normally are, simply because there are less of them, and so they are easier to notice. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be worse or that they're going to be radically better. They just might be a hell of a lot easier to notice. They might be louder for you. As well, your personal transits also might be a little bit louder for you this month than they normally are for the same reason. I mean, maybe you are having a ton of personal transits this month, but those are sort of, emphasized by what's happening in the sky, which is relatively quiet this month. So that stuff may just stand out to you. And what do I mean by stand out? You might notice them more. The metaphors might be more obvious to you. That sort of thing. Again, not saying that it's going to be better, not saying that it's going to be worse, not even really saying that it's going to be more intense, though it might be, but it might just be easier to notice it this month. So, on that note, this might be a really cool month to double down and study your astrology, because you don't have a bajillion planets or a bajillion different transits to keep track of this month. You've only got a few. And so it might be easier to focus on them. Okay. The other very interesting thing that is happening in August, or another interesting thing that's happening astronomically here in August, is we have two full moons. We have a full moon on August 1st, and we have another full moon on August 30th. How does that happen? Well, the lunar cycle is 29 and a half days, and August has 31 days. Every month that we have 31 days, there's always a chance that we could have two full moons. It's rare, it doesn't happen all the time, but it's happening this month. So, in whatever way you want, you might work with that, take care of that, consider it. The next full moon on August 30th, that is going to be the super 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 duper super moon of the year. It will be the one that is the closest to the planet, but we will talk about that more in 30 days from now, 29 and a half days from now. Okay. So just wanted to mention that because I think it's kind of an interesting thing. Again, like I said, we don't have that every week or every month or every year for that matter. I know what I'm talking about. Okay, look, I'm a professional. All right. What else is going on in astrology for this day, Tuesday, August 1st? We have Mars in Virgo trine Jupiter in Taurus at 13 degrees. This is a hell yeah kind of transit. That's what this is. This is absolutely a hell yeah kind of transit. Um this is an opportunity for a boost in your finances, a boost in your career. Um this is a fantastic time for checking in on your plans around your work, little work or big capital W work, whatever it is that you're doing in the world. This is a really fantastic time. What we have is, the firecracker of the zodiac, Mars, right? The gas tank, plus in a trine with the hell yeah of the zodiac, Jupiter. And trines are places where the two planets get along swimmingly. They are very stoked to be hanging out with each other. They're on the same page, they're in full agreement, and there's a lot of high fiving going on between the two planets. Now, if there's anything that's like about a transit, or excuse me, anything that's about a trine, God forbid that anybody has anything negative to say about a trine, but here it is. Trines can also sometimes feel like a place where everything is working so well that we don't need to do anything with it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of an attitude. And so why I emphasize this is because I don't want you to waste this transit. Now, if you've been working your ass off and you need a day off that you can feel good about taking, take a damn day off. Enjoy. It's on me. It's on the universe, honestly. Take it, have it, enjoy. We don't need to be working and grinding all the time. Grind culture is cringe, guys. Come on. But if you are in a place where you are, recalibrating, or, you're like, I'm halfway through my thing, or I'm a quarter way through my thing. Let me pull the car over and, check my calibration and check my orientation and make sure that I'm headed in the direction I want to be headed in, blah, blah, blah. This is a fantastic transit for doing that. If there's something that we have been putting off that we really need to tackle, this is a fantastic transit for supporting that. Very, very cool. It's good astrology, and I'm very happy to see it. Also, on this same day, we have Mercury in Virgo opposing Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 5 degrees. Oh, no, no, it's completely fine. This is another transit that actually is here to help. Um, Mercury is our planet of communication, thinking, communicate. Oh, I just said communication. Hi, hello. Repetition, apparently, as well. It's the planet that represents our process around taking in data and dispensing data to other people and being in communication with folks. And Saturn is the planet that is, angry grandpa, as we like to refer to Saturn here on the podcast. But Saturn is also about discipline. It's about structure. It's about responsibility. It's about taking things slow and making sure that we are covering all the bases and hitting all the marks. And so having that Mars Jupiter situation off to one side could get our engines super duper revved up, right? And we're just running around like chickens with our heads cut off. This Mercury oppose Saturn situation that's also happening later in the day, I think can help mellow some of the enthusiasm of that first transit and really bring in something that is like, nope, I'm going to think my way through this. We're going to talk this out. We're going to come up with a plan. We're going to come up with the structure or the container that this hell yeah energy needs to be effective. And we're going to implement it and put it into place and make some shit happen. It's dope. It's very, very supportive. It is. I'm very happy to see it, especially after, again, the last 2 weeks of relatively funky astrology that we've had. This is a very, very nice high five and assist from the universe. Very stoked to see it. Okay. What do we have going on for our holy days? Literally everything. There are so many holy days on the calendar at this time of year. It's like, oh my gosh, okay, we get it. You guys are stoked. It's the sun, it's the moon, it's the stars. Yes, hooray. So, looking through our holy days, throughout the month of August, we have green corn ceremonies from several indigenous tribes here in North America, or Turtle Island, as some folks call it. Throughout the month of August, from our Yoruba land and Nigerian friends and ancestors, we have festivals dedicated to the great goddess Oshun. And as we move through Lunasa season and towards fall equinox and Mabon, we're going to see more and more and more festivals dedicated to water deities, body of water deities, and waterway deities. And it kicks off day one with these festivals dedicated to Oshun. But something else is happening at this time of year that's very, very special. For our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, the 5-day quote unquote month epigomenal section of the year is kicking off. And this 5-day piece was something that ancient Egyptians used as an intercalary spacing from between the end of the old year and the beginning of the new year. Their year was 360 days, and they also knew that that wasn't quite right mathematically. And so they would use this 5-day chunk to space out kind of a time outside of time, basically, for them. And during this time period, there is this saying goodbye to the old year, and then a preparation for the beginning of the new year. And during this time period was when a lot of the births of the great gods and great goddesses of ancient Egypt were placed. So at this time, we have the birth of Osiris, the birth of Hero-Eris, which is another name for Horus. We have the appearance of Min, the appearance of Heru, the feast of Heka the child, who I will talk more about here in just a section, and the procession of Hathor. And that's just this day. We have more coming up in the following days. And it was a really big deal. This portion of the year, this moment was kicked off by the heliacal rising of the fixed star Sirius, which we talked about a few weeks ago. It was also kicked off by the rising and flooding of the Nile River in ancient Egypt. The Nile River has been dammed. The Aswan Dam has stopped this process. I think that was built in the 1960s. So we don't have that geological phenomenon happening anymore. But these two cycles were in sync with each other, and they indicated the end of the old year and the beginning of the new year for ancient Egyptians. So kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal. We also have the Shapatu of Ishtar, which is another death and rebirth moment for her. From our Peruvian friends and ancestors, we have Pachamama Remi, which is the ruling or the rise of Pachamama, who is a great earth goddess, a great producer and creator goddess. We have the Asala Puja from our friends and ancestors in Thailand, which is the moment when Buddha gives his first sermon, out of which the Four Noble Truths are, sort of announced or taught, which the Four Noble Truths are the baseline for basically every other branch of Buddhism that exists. So, kind of a big deal. All of this stuff lining up because we have our full moon on the same day as Lunasa. So, pretty cool stuff going on. Pretty auspicious this year. Other things happening from our Catholic friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of St. Sophia and the Feast of Ignatius of Loyola. From our Norse friends and ancestors, we have the days of Loki and Sigyn, as well as Freyfaxi. And so, again, a big giant piling up. So I said I was going to come back to briefly discussing Heka the child. This is a very interesting deity. Heka, the child, is also transliterated as Hekau or Heku, and was the deification of magic and medicine in ancient Egypt. The name is the Egyptian word for magic. According to Egyptian literature, Heka existed before duality had yet come into being. And the term Heka was also used to refer to the practice of magical rituals. So, first off, there's something very interesting here because we have this deity being born in this time out of time, right? Before the duality, before the beginning of the new year, we have this deity. But also, Heka being the embodiment of magic, some archaeologists believe that Heka is the precursor to Hecate, the great Greek goddess of magic and magical practice itself. So something very interesting there, right? That's really, really cool connection. Um, Other things that we can say about Heka, just glancing through my notes, I'm like, is there anything else I need to say here? Is there anything else I need to bring up? Um, no. Yes. By the time of the coffin texts, Heka is said to have been created at the beginning of time by the creator Atum, sometimes also being personified as the creator god, presented as a man or a child, and in some imagery holding two snakes. Heka is also said to be one of the three facets of the creator, along with Saya and Hu. Very interesting stuff. Very, very cool. And for before I forget to mention it, hi, if you're new here, queen of the tangents, queen of the sidetrack. We are in the midst of the month of Hecatombion for our ancient Egyptian or ancient Greek friends and ancestors. So we're in a month that is, by its very name, connected to Heka the child and possibly Hecate. Very cool, very interesting stuff, right? Think about what you may have been taught about this goddess, but juxtapose that, or put that alongside what you might be learning about Lunasa season and this portion of the year of Leo, right? I think when we think about a goddess like Hecate, we might be thinking of more like scorpionic themes, right? We might be connecting her to Samhain. We might be connecting her to the dark and spooky times of the year, or the very like mystical, magical times of the year that are more stereotypically connected to magic and witchcraft and things like that. But think about that here in the heart of the summer. That's a very interesting alignment with a deep power. And something else that I forgot to mention was about Sophia. Sophia is the embodiment of wisdom. Now, the Catholics witness her as Saint Sophia, but Gnostics worship Sophia as a goddess in and of her or itself. Sophia is also an idea. I don't know if it's quite appropriate to say deity, but certainly an entity and an archetype in uh, Jewish practice as well. So, um, interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Okay, let's move on to August 2nd. What do we have going on August 2nd? Not much. There is no astrology of note for August 2nd. So we're going to scooch directly to the holy days and talk about just a little bit of this. August 2nd and 3rd, we have the Sonokia from our Greek friends and ancestors, our ancient Greek friends and ancestors. This was just a more of a political holiday than anything else around the unification of Attica and Athens and other city states in Greece. But back to that big Egyptian hoedown that's happening, we have the birth of Set and the festival of Thoeris. And Thoeris is another name for an ancient deity named Tort or Tuat or Taweret, is the name that I am the most familiar with. This is an ancient Egyptian goddess of childbirth and fertility. The name Taweret means she who is great, or even simply great one, and is a common pacificatory address to dangerous deities. So it was a way of saying, well, like, if you had to deal with a dangerous deity, like, oh, you're so great, tower it, please don't whoop me while I'm trying to talk with you. This was the Lady of Heaven, the mistress of the horizon, but also she who removes water, mistress of pure water, and Lady of the birth house. Now, taking that into the larger context of, we know in the ancient Egyptian world, the Nile was rising at this time and flooding its banks. So here we have a deity, a very powerful deity, whose name literally was an appeasement to dangerous forces. Possibly this was a way of addressing those flooding waters of like, wow, you're so awesome. Please don't flood everything, right? Like, we love what you do, but don't do it too much. But also, this 5-day moment before the sun, Ra, is reborn into, and the new year is born. And so we have also the Lady of the Birth House. Very interesting stuff here. Okay, what else is happening on this day? We have from our Jewish friends and ancestors, Tu B'Av, and this is a minor holiday, but it is dedicated to marriage and love and happiness. This comes at the end of a 3-week mourning period for our Jewish friends and ancestors. And this connects us to other Lunasa themes, as we talked about in the class. This is one of the Sabbats where sacred marriage happens between deities, and it's much more about the connecting of power sources than it is about love or producing children. But all the same, we do have sacred marriage here, and Tu B'Av is a traditional day for marriages for our Jewish community. From our Buddhist friends and ancestors, we have Vasa, and this is kicking off a 3-month retreat, basically, that's kind of similar to Lent, where Buddhists will retreat and go and ponder the things that they have learned from Buddha the day before, right? Remember, August 1st, this year is in alignment with Asala Puja, and the dispensing of the Four Noble Truths. And now the people are taking those Four Noble Truths back to their, to wherever it is that they're from, and they're sitting there and they're pondering them for the next 3 months. From our Gnostic friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of the Black Madonna, and very interesting, again, tangent, side note, hi, this is the brand, this is what we do here. We have a tremendous amount of holidays dedicated specifically to Black Madonnas at this time of year. There's a lot in July, but there is a whole lot in August. Again, interesting connection here. Now, Black Madonnas are a very interesting and unique representation of the Virgin Mary, question mark. And when we study Black Madonnas around the world, they all are venerated both as an archetype, a deity, right? An entity in and of itself, a spiritual concept, but also the actual icon, the actual statue or the painting itself is venerated too. So that's an interesting thing. But this is a very special side of the Virgin Mary. Some people think of Black Madonnas as their own goddess or their own entity in their own right, and only being similar to the Virgin Mary. Other people say, no, 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 this is an aspect of the Virgin Mary. So your mileage may vary with that. Do your own research there and come to your own opinions. But many sources, many churches who hold a Black Madonna insist that these icons were originally created with white faces, precious porcelain white faces, and that over the years they have turned black from candle soot and from being touched and all this other stuff. Now, what's very interesting is that the rest of the icon has not turned black, just the face and hands. And so, of course, there are other groups that say, no, they were created this way. And so then the question is, why? Why would this particular visage, this particular piece of the Virgin Mary have been created with black face and black hands? And I don't mean black like brown. I mean black, like absence of color, black. Um, Again, connecting to the larger picture here, that we have possibly worship of Hecate at this time. I'm just going to let you run with that. I'm just going to put that there. And you do with that what you will. And also from our Catholic and pagan friends, we have the Feast of the Lady of Angels, and this is yet another Black Madonna. Like I said, we have a lot of them at this time of year. All right, that brings us to August 3rd. And what do we have going on August 3rd? No astrology of note. Let me check the book again. Yep, nope, no astrology of note. The moon is doing stuff, but I'm not talking about it. And so let's move on directly to the holy days from our Iroquois friends and ancestors. Running approximately from August 3rd to August 8th, we have the bean ceremony. So we kick off with green corn ceremony. Now we're moving into bean ceremony. Squash ceremonies will come soon. And of course, those are the three sisters that we learn about when we study indigenous farming practices, and the ancient science that native people here in North America, indigenous people of North America, practiced to grow their food. There is the connection of the three sisters: corn, beans, and squash. And so this kicks off the bean ceremony for our Iroquois friends and ancestors. From our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, back to that big thing, badam, time for the birth of Isis. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She's kind of a big deal. Isis used to be her own thing, and a lot of other goddesses got added to her as the centuries and the millennia went by. Remember that when we're talking about ancient Egypt, we are talking about a vast stretch of time, thousands and thousands of years, and there were different eras and different practices in those different eras. And so, another name that you can utilize to do research around Isis is Aset, Aset. Wait a minute. So there's Set and Aset. Uh-huh. Very interesting. Again, right? If you know anything about Set, that is the brother of Osiris who murders Osiris. And is the ending of Ra and the end of the day and the western edge, of chaos, etc., etc. So many things to say about Set in so little time. Okay, what else is happening on this day? From our Roman friends and ancestors, we have three different holidays. We have one, Tiberinalia, and this was a festival held on the same day as another festival, which I'll talk about in just a second, as a festival honoring the father river Tiber or Tiber. It may reflect renewed imperial patronage of the traditional Roman deities, in particular, the dedication made to Tiberinus by the emperors. So, a waterway deity being worshipped here. Also on this day, from our ancient friends in Rome and our ancestors, we have Portunalia. What is that? This was the ancient Roman god of keys, doors, livestock, and ports. He may have originally protected warehouses where grain was stored, which makes a lot of sense here at this time of year, but later became associated with ports, perhaps because folks associate the gateway or the door and the harbor or the gateway to the sea, or because of an expansion in the meaning of portus, the word portus. So we have a couple of very interesting symbols kind of laying on top of each other. One, we have a connection to waterway stuff, right? Okay. But two, we have a connection to a deity that is known for carrying keys. That's bringing us back to Hecate again. And then three, we have a deity that represents doorways or the threshold of something. And again, we know for our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, we are about to walk through the gate or through over the threshold into the new year. So yeah, right? There's a lot of stuff going on here, kind of layered on top of each other. Pretty interesting stuff. On this day, keys were thrown into a fire for good luck in a very solemn and lugubrious manner. His attribute was a key, his main temple in the city of Rome. So, yes. Cool. Also connected closely to Janus, and this is the third thing that's happening for ancient Romans is the dies natalis of the temple of Janus. Dies natalis, if you're new here, this would have been the birthday of the temple itself. It might have been the day that the first stone was laid, or it might have been the day that the temple was blessed and opened to the public. But there's always a day every year that's dedicated to the celebrating of the temple itself, and that would be this day. And last but not least, from our pagan friends, modern pagan friends and ancestors, we have the Day of the Dryads. And Dryads, of course, are spirits that inhabit trees, orchards, forests, and what I connect this to, this is from our modern practices of the pagan wheel of the year. This is not necessarily something that we would find in ancient practices, but maybe. But what I connect it to is going out and blessing and worshiping the orchards that are coming into their fullness of fruit. Not harvestable yet necessarily, right? That fruit isn't ripe, but it is probably appearing at this time. We know that throughout this portion of the year, torchlight processions, the good kind, not the shitty kind, torchlight processions would have been a big celebratory practice during Lunasa season, where you went out and marched through the fields and marched through the orchards to bless the grain that was about to be harvested, and to bless the orchards as they continued to produce food and fruit. All right. Let's move on to August 4th. But before that, how about an ad? Okay. If you love this podcast, you can support this work through Patreon. Thank you a bajillion billion times. See, the sirens are going off even as I say it. Thank you so much to my patrons. You guys don't even know. You don't even know. Thank you so much. You can sub for as little as $1 if you just think this podcast is dope and you want to support it. I don't run ads on the podcast, partly because I don't want to, and partly because I won't get paid even if I do. So screw them, man. You can sub, as I said, for as little as $1 or $5, even if you want to just support the podcast. And this is plenty of information. But if you want even more information, extra podcasts, extra videos, extra information about the Wheel of the Year, magical practices, tarot, etc., subbing at the higher levels, you get all kinds of cool free stuff. And at the even higher levels, you get free readings every month with me to be able to integrate all of this information into your personal life based on what's going on in your natal chart and all of that other good stuff. Join and change your life forever. Or, whatever. Thanks so much for the support. If you can't support financially, I completely understand, because life sucks on Earth right now. It's too expensive for everything. Tell a friend, share it on social media, give it a thumbs up. If you're feeling especially hedonistic, you can leave a rating or a review. All right, that's the end of the ad. Let's get back to the podcast. Okie doke, my precious artichokes. This brings us to Friday, August 4th, wherein we discover at 3:53 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, later in the day / the next day for everybody else around the planet, a disseminating moon in Pisces at 27 degrees. Now, this moon is conjunct Neptune at exactly 27 degrees and sextile Pluto retrograde in Capricorn at 29 degrees. So let's break it down. First off, disseminating. What is that? Well, this is the first phase after the full moon. And to disseminate means to scatter, right? To spread out, to dispense. This is, in our metaphor around our process, the point where the fruit that appeared at the full moon begins to ripen, and now it is time to reap the rewards. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, very cool alignment to have a full moon actually land on Lunasa, because we have this emphasis of reaping the rewards or reaping the effects of the work that we have been doing. And sometimes what we see appear at the full moon doesn't actually begin to play out or settle in until now or after now. So it even could be that at the beginning of your week, stuff, but then how that stuff is going to play out starts to become more obvious as we approach the weekend. So just observe that for yourself in your process and the people that are around you, and see if that's true for you this week. So, what are we doing with a disseminating moon in Pisces? Um, the big conversation that we are encouraged to focus on is around the ideas of sacrifice and quote unquote giving until it hurts, end quote. And I'm getting this from Moon Phase Astrology. This is a book by Raven Caldera. We talk about it a lot here on the podcast. I love the book. I agree with most of it. There's stuff that I don't agree with, but that's literally true for every book on magic and astrology I've ever read. And I think that it's a really sound piece of work, and I think it points us in a cool direction of working with the moon in all of its phases, in all of the different signs. Um, and so Pisces. Pisces is a sign that is mutable. It's a water sign, and it's very dedicated to the idea of service to the point of sacrifice. It's very dedicated to the idea of um, religious ecstasy to the point of martyrdom at times. And so Pisces talks about a place where the boundaries really blur, and what is me blurs into what is the all. And there can be a martyr or victimhood element in working with Pisces energy. Now, that's not the only stuff that's going on. There's also a very deeply empathetic energy to the world of Piscean symbolism. And so it's the place where we profoundly connect to stuff, other people, ideas, situations that are happening. Now, I don't know if you've been outside lately, but there's a little bit of suffering in the world. Folks are having a hard time. I don't know if you're hip to any of that stuff, but it's kind of crazy here on planet Earth lately. And do people need help? Yes. Are systems falling apart? Yeah. Are powerful people flexing for the sake of power at the detriment of, literally millions of other people? Yeah. Yeah. It's happening a lot all the time. This is a moon that can really call us to charitable service versus mutual aid. And I'm going to break this down. Charitable service is I have something, right? I have labor, I have time, I have energy, I have money, I have access to power, I have something, and I'm going to give it to you, the individual, or you, the group, right? I have a thing, these people need it, here it is, have it. That's charity. And charity is very necessary and a really good thing in this world. In my opinion, mutual aid is even better, because in mutual aid, what we are saying is I have something you need, and you, by default, will have something that I need, because none of us have everything that we need. And mutually we aid each other, and we all are better off. And where there can be a pitfall in charity is, number one, we can feel like we are above the situation or better than the situation because I have something you don't. And mutual aid can be very uncomfortable for a lot of us, because we have to admit inherently, I don't have everything I need. I do need some help. And that means I got to ask for help, and I got to talk about like needing help, and right? Like that's a funky place for a lot of us. Okay. Getting off on a bit of a, hey, welcome again, tangent, some leftist BS in there for you. But in the disseminating moon in Pisces, we can get really fixated on the idea of I must pour out what I have to share. I must pour out. I must pour out. I must pour out. And we can not really think about what we might need and allow people to give to us. That's part of what might be challenging for us on this moon. And especially with this conjunction to Neptune, which is the modern ruling planet of Pisces. So, very Piscean moon here on August 4th. Um, there can be a real like giving until we have obliterated ourselves, giving until we've gone way, way beyond what our boundaries of comfort are. And in this chapter, what Raven Caldera encourages is to pay attention to your process, to witness yourself doing this. Go help people. Yes. If you have stuff to share, share it. Yes. But witness where you are internally urged or inclined to give well beyond your means, or to serve to the point of sacrifice, or where martyrdom in whatever form it might come up as is something that like feels really appropriate to the situation, as opposed to helping in some other way that's more reasonable. Right? And where does that go for you? Where does that get weird for you? Explore that stuff in whatever ways are safe and healthy, right? Again, we've got a lot of funky stuff going on in the world. This is a week where we have some relatively easy astrology, so maybe doing some personal exploration around this feels more supported, or it feels a little safer for you. Or maybe you, in me bringing all this stuff up, you're thinking to yourself, man, I have been wringing myself out like a washcloth lately. I've been giving everything I have to give. What do you mean give more? No, maybe it's time for you to stop. Maybe it's time for you to recognize I'm uncomfortable. This isn't healthy. It's not working for me. I need to pull back. And then witness what comes up for you there, right? Do you feel guilty about taking care of yourself in the face of other people still having needs? Do you feel guilty about holding back some of what is in your jug to be poured out? That stuff. Disseminating moons sometimes are cool to work with, and sometimes they bring up complicated issues. Remember, we are looking at the effects of our efforts, right? And the effects or the results of our efforts sometimes are cool and super fun and rad. And sometimes it's like, oh, that's what I've been working on. Oh. So, again, as we like to say here, your mileage may vary with this particular moon, but be easy on yourself. Take care of yourself. If you have something to share, share it. If you've been sharing, is it time to turn off the spout and take care of yourself a little bit? That thing. Remember, note the conjunction to Neptune and the sextile to Pluto. Also, here in Capricorn, there may be a real urge to fixate on this and to get a little obsessive about your thinking around this. And there may be a sense of, no, it's fine. I'll just obliterate myself for the cause. No, it's fine. I'll just go and go and go until I'm totally emptied out. That'll be fine. It's probably not going to be fine. It's probably up to you to kind of challenge that Neptunian energy there. Also, because this is in Pisces and because of the conjunction to Neptune, some of this may be really hard to put into words for yourself. And so it might be something that you need to feel your way through, make some art, do some stream of consciousness writing. Don't demand a perfectly executed intellectualization of this argument from yourself. This may be more about nebulous feelings and kind of hazy intuitive hits and that kind of stuff. Okay. Otherwise, relatively chill. I know after all of that, you're like, what? No. But yes, otherwise, relatively chill. Later in the day, the moon enters Aries. And I think a lot of that energy is going to shift for us out of, I have to pour out my jug eternally for everybody else, to actually, I'm going to take a moment to fill my jug for myself. So that energy does shift later in the day. For our lunar body work with our disseminating moon in Pisces, we are resting, relaxing, nourishing, supporting, and otherwise restoring the legs, especially the ankles and the feet. What have you been walking? What path are you on? Right? There's the metaphor for us. And for our plant body work, we are planting root plants, except potatoes. We've had a long conversation about this. The potatoes of rebellion. I know you're out there. The potatoes of rebellion. Plant a damn potato if you're moved to. Okay. But some sources say don't. But this is also a great time to water, irrigate, or look at your watering systems and your irrigation systems, grafting, layering, taking cuttings, as well as planting biennials, perennials, bulbs, roots, trees, grapes, berries, potatoes, shrubs, pulling weeds, cutting trees for firewood or lumber, plowing, cultivating, and pruning trees and vines, doing a little bit of pest and disease control, as well as harvesting harvesting our below ground crops, specifically for drying and for storage. Okay. Moving into the holy days of August 4th, we have from our Hopi friends and ancestors running from approximately August 4th to August 13th, the flute ceremony. And the flute ceremony is dedicated to calling in the rainfall that is going to support the growth of the corn. As we said, we've got these green corn ceremonies happening all month long. So this is connected to that. And this is the primary food source of the Hopi Nation. So this is a really big deal. This is a festival that is, generally speaking, not open to the public. There is information about it online, but this is, generally speaking, not something that the public is invited to attend. This is a much more private ceremony. Also on this day from our Egyptian friends and ancestors, continuing with the big 5-day freakout, we have the birth of Nephthys or Nephthys, which is the daughter of Nut or Nut. And she is described as the pure fish before the bark of Ra, because this is also the night of Ra. This is the eve of the birthday of the new year and the eve of the birth of Ra, the sun, in its new cycle. Love that description of her as the pure fish before the bark of Ra. Remember all of our Nile stuff that's going on. Okay. And from our Rwandan friends and ancestors, we have the festival of Umu Ganaru. Excuse me. I think I mispronounced that. Let me try this again. Umu Garanura. There we go. This is a Rwandan harvest festival celebrated on the first Friday in August. It's a public holiday that celebrates the country's cultural heritage as well as its achievement in various sectors of the economy, etc., etc. But this is an incredibly old festival. This goes back way before colonial times. This is a first fruits festival. And this is there are some very interesting echoes in this festival to festivals that we see in Eastern, Central, and Western Europe around the first fruits being pulled in of the first harvest. For Europeans, this would have been grains. And it was prohibited for the family to eat this stuff. In the Rwandan form, it was prohibited for people to eat it before the elders tasted it. And so these first fruits were dedicated to the family ancestors. It was a day of feasting and giving thanks to ancestors and to God. And same for our Western, Central, and Eastern, and Europe, and Western, Central, and Eastern European friends and ancestors of the pagan variety, where those first grains would not have been eaten by anybody necessarily. They would have been baked into a loaf of bread, and that bread broken up and the pieces scattered back into the fields. Now, we talk about our ancestors and working with ancestors underground during Lunasa season in the class. So again, if you haven't watched the class, stop here, go watch the class and come back and see how there is a very interesting connection to this stuff. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Okay. Moving on to the August 5th. I was like, what's happening? Okay, no, I know what's happening. I'm a professional. We have the heliacal rising of the fixed star Acubans. So this fixed star is actually found in the constellation of Cancer. Yes, we are still technically moving through stars connected to the constellation of Cancer, even though we are well into Leo season in tropical astrology. This is the big conversation that we have around what form of astrology are we working with, etc., etc. I'm not getting into it right now. But this is Akubins, which comes from the Arabic term al-Zubana, which means the claws. And so we literally are passing through the claws of Cancer at this time. And tangent, another side note about working with fixed stars. I just found a really cool website called inthesky.org. It's in-the-sky.org. Go to their data tables section and go to the ephemeres section. And there you can look up any planet, cool, or star and find the heliacal rising, more or less, for wherever you are on the planet. Now, heliacal risings are when a fixed star rises just before the sun. And so we see the fixed star come up over the eastern horizon in the glow of the sun that's also about to rise. It's a very special event. It was a very auspicious moment for ancient cultures, and it was a timekeeping practice for ancient and modern cultures. A lot of our modern calendars are still connected to fixed stars because that stuff doesn't change from century to century. It does, but we don't have time to explain that now. Just the precession of the equinoxes. That's all I can say. Zodiacal precession. Go look it up. PRE, precession. But this was a really special moment, right? We have the Egyptian calendar that we keep talking about throughout this particular podcast and the last couple of weeks being aligned to the heliacal rising of the fixed star Sirius. When people started to see that star, boom, we knew the old year is ending, the new year is coming. Here we go. And so you can look stuff up based on where you live. And now this is one of the important parts is based on where you live, there can be up to 5 or 6 weeks difference in when that heliacal rising is actually going to start. It's not only just where are you on the planet, but how high or low are you? What is your altitude, as well as how close you are to the equator or the North Pole. All of these things come into play in terms of when will you, wherever you are currently, be able to see a fixed star. So when we talk about the risings, the heliacal risings of fixed stars here on the podcast, we are able to align them with myths and folk tales and other festivals and holidays that are happening at the same time of the year. But that's because all of these things are going to be happening approximately in the same chunk of the year, varying by days or even weeks, but not varying by months or seasons, right? If it's happening in the middle of summer, it's happening in the middle of summer. If it's happening in winter, it's happening in winter. So we'll have that differentiation. But I just wanted to pass on that resource that I just discovered because, wow, really, really cool. Very, very accurate. Super dope. Okay, moving on. From August 5th to September 1st, we have the tree month of Hazel. So the Hazel moon is another name for this full moon that we just had. And this was known to the Celts as Coll, Coll, which translates to the life force inside you. This is the time of year when hazelnuts begin to appear on the trees, and they are an early part of the harvest. Hey, tree stuff, which we've already talked about here on the podcast. Okay. Hazelnuts are also associated with wisdom and protection. Sophia, the embodiment of wisdom. Hecate, the child, the embodiment of wisdom and magic. Okay. Hazel is often associated in Celtic lore with sacred wells and magical springs containing the salmon of knowledge. Hello. We've got waterway stuff. We've got deities that are the embodiment of knowledge and wisdom and magical work. Okay. This is a good month, the month of Hazel. again, running from August 5th to September 1st. This is a good month for doing workings related to wisdom and knowledge, like dowsing and divination and dream journeys. And we know that divination is one of the big practices in Lunasa season, because at Litha and Lunasa, because we want to be able to predict and get as much information as we can around these first harvests. Because as we talked about in class, and as we talked about last week on the podcast, how these first harvests go kind of dictates how well everything else is going to work out for the next 9-ish months or more, right? If the harvest is huge, that means we've all got plenty to eat. We can potentially keep more animals through the winter fed, etc., etc. If the harvest is wimpy, if a weird storm blows through or not enough rain blows through, it can really screw up the harvest. And then we have to make some hard decisions about how are we going to make it through fall and winter and spring before all the veggies and the fruits and the nuts start producing again. So, again, we're looking at the results of our work. We're looking at the results of the effects of our efforts, all of that stuff. If you are a creative type, such as an artist, a writer, a musician, this is a fantastic month to get your muse back and to find some inspiration for your talents. So even if you don't normally do so, this is a great time to write a poem or sing a song. And this is also something that we talk about a lot in the class. Leo season is the time to perform. It's the time for us to get up on stage and be in the spotlight and dance and sing and show off and take some of the responsibility for entertaining the audience, but also to feel that thrill, the discomfort, and the joy of being the star, being in the spotlight, being the entertainer, all of that good stuff. Okay. Looking at our holy days from August 5th, or continuing to look at our holy days from August 5th. Sorry, I got all wrapped up in the tree month of Hazel. From August 5th to 7th, we have the feasts of Num and Amun. This is, again, an extension of this big thing that's happening for our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors. And then we also have Wep Ron Pet, which is the new year proper. This is the birth or the start of the actual new year, the opening of the year. This is the appearance of Horus, the Lord of Kom-Ombo, Heru and Thoth, etc., etc. Like pretty much every member of the Egyptian pantheon is celebrated, recognized, a candle lit, a cup spilled out for them, something. This is the start of the start, the opening of the year, all of the good stuff. From our Roman friends and ancestors, we have Venalia Rustica for Venus, and this was a wine harvest, a wine-oriented festival held in honor of Jupiter and Venus, out in the boonies. You had festivals that were held in the cities, and then festivals that were held out in the farmlands, and this would have been the version of that festival held outside of the city, out in the farmlands. From Spain, we have the Feast of Our Lady of Africa. This is yet another Black Madonna holiday. And this day also kicks off one Anket, which is the this is the first day of the first month of the beginning of the year of the ancient Egyptian New Year. Okay. Moving to August 6th. Sunday, August 6th, we have the sun in Leo, square Jupiter in Taurus at 14 degrees. Rad. Once again, as I said at the beginning of the podcast, even when it's a square, even when it's an opposition, when it's with Jupiter, it's almost never bad. We can overdo it, we can overspend, we can overpromise, we can overextend ourselves, but generally speaking, as long as we can keep that into control, everything else is pretty great. And so this is a really fantastic day for shining in your professional field, doing whatever it is that you're doing with some flair, with some bravado. Be big, take up space, be loud, be bold, be brash, be flashy. This is 100% the day to do it, in the season to do it. So this is a really lovely transit. Again, helping us kick off Lughnasadh season. It's like It's really, really cool because we're not going to get a transit like this every year at the start of Lunasa. So extremely supportive. I'm literally looking at my notes and that's it. It's just like, go be a badass, go be dope, go be super extra rad. Wear that outfit that you're like, oh, I could never pull that off. Today, you 100% can pull it off. So hurry up and go do it. And looking at the holy days that we have from our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, we are continuing through with this really epic opening of the year with the procession of Ihi, the Great Lotus. Um, this appears at the beginning of the year. Ihi is depicted with a sistrum in his left hand. He is wide of stride and wears the double crown on the first day when he rises as Osiris. He appears like this god from the first day of his birth to claim the inheritance of his father. And so this is sort of like almost like an embodiment of the grandeur of the gods. And this energy, this archetype is stepping forward to sort of say, bitch, we have arrived. Check it out. There are also feasts for Shur and Anhur and Mahahis and a bunch of other deities, again, connected to this great New Year festival that's happening at this time. From our Celtic friends and ancestors, we have the Fire Festival of Tan Hill. And this is again, connecting to Lughnasadh and sun worship and fire worship and all of that energy that's happening at this time of year. From our Catholic friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of the Transfiguration of Christ. This is the moment that it's basically sort of like, oh, wait, Jesus is special. wait, there's something really fancy happening with this guy, Jesus. What's interesting in the Slavic lands, this day is also called the feast of, or the apple feast of the Savior. And so here is a connection to our orchards, right? Here's a connection to the trees that are producing fruit at this time of year. And on a much more somber note, uh, this day also marks the US bombing of Hiroshima. And there is a very sinister connection to fire and to power and to that brilliance, right? What this, I mean, this is a horrible day all of itself. What it makes me think about also is the connections to deities like Sekhmet from the Egyptian pantheon, who was worshipped as this incredibly powerful solar god who totally lost control of her power from time to time and had to be appeased and sort of called back from literally killing everybody on the planet with her heat and her capacity for destruction. And so this too is something for us to think about when we are moving through Lunasa season. And we will have more opportunities to think about this later. Mostly, this is a week filled with a lot of celebration and a lot of like, wow, look at how bright and bold and amazing we all are. Let's go be badasses in the world. Let's do it to it. But this is a very somber moment and sobering moment to remember. There's always an opportunity to overdo it. There's always an opportunity to blast everybody out with our power. And there's always an opportunity for power to not be used responsibly. As an aside, I don't think that there is a way to use nuclear bombs responsibly. So I'm not a big fan of, if we didn't do it, they would have. We could just get our shit together as a species and just like not kill each other. But I know. It's radical. I know. All right, let's move on to the next day. All right, last but not least, this brings us to Monday, August 7th, where we have no astrology of note. As I said, a chill week. Astrologically, it's kind of nice, and everybody seems to be here to help. So we'll take it. So, moving directly on to our holy days for Monday, August 7th, we kick off with the marking of solar Lughnasadh at 15 degrees of Leo. So all of the cross-quarter Sabbats, which are Imbolc, Beltane, Lughnasadh, and Samhain, fall in the midst of all of our fixed signs, Aquarius, Taurus, Leo, and Scorpio. And the moment where the sun crosses over the 15-degree mark currently aligns with these old holidays, these old versions of the holiday or old calendar markers for the holidays. If we look back through the years, we'll see that the 6th or the 7th of the month is the old Samhain or old Lammas or old Imbolc. And that's because it aligns to this 15-degree mark. The other thing about saying that it is the solar Lunasa or solar Imbolc or what have you is that this is the exact halfway point between the last Sabbath and the next Sabbath. And so the very interesting way that we see that these moments have been markers in time through history. Okay, what else is happening on this day? We'd have another heliacal rising of the fixed star Doob. And Doob is interesting. The traditional name Doob, comes from the Arabic word for bear. The original phrase was Zar ad-Dub al-Akbar, which means the back of the greater bear. And another traditional name is Ak, which means the eye. Now, that's all very interesting and cool, but also from our Slavic friends and ancestors, we have the Feast of Volos's beard. Who is Volos? Volos is a Slavic god that is connected to the fertility and harvest cycle that runs throughout the year and is in a perpetual fight with another vegetation god named Perun. It's a very Oak King, Holly King type of dynamic between these two, and they wrestle and argue and fight on behalf of the goddesses and for power or to take power away from each other and all of that stuff. In this particular moment, they are fighting over the goddess Mokosh, who represents wetness and moisture and rain and water. Right, a very interesting connection here to our water deities, an interesting connection. And when we're thinking about, fighting for the right amount of rain at this time of year, not too much, not too little, all of that good stuff. But Volos in this fight appears as a bear. What? I'm sure it's just a coincidence. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Of running from August 7th to 8th for our Islamic friends and ancestors, we have the holiday of Ashura. And Ashura marks the moment when Moses and the Israelites were saved from the Pharaoh by the parting of the Red Sea. It's that moment. That's what's being celebrated here. From our ancient Egyptian friends and ancestors, we have feasts for Ptah, who is literally not only the son of Ra, but the literal embodiment of knowledge and craftsman, architecture. He's the husband of Sekhmet, who is also being worshipped on this day. So here, as I just mentioned, there's that energy around Sekhmet, a goddess who is known for her incredible power, but then also a very fiery and destructive wielding of that power at times. From our Roman friends and ancestors, we have Consuelia, and Consuelia is a date dedicated to the god Consueles, or Consus, pronounced both ways, a tutelary deity of the harvest and stored grains. Makes perfect sense given the time of year, right? The shrine of Consus was underground and it was covered with earth all year and was only uncovered on this one day. Mars, the god of war, as a protector of the harvest, was also honored on this day, as were the Lares, the household gods that individual families held sacred. During this celebration, horses and mules and asses were exempted from all labor. They were led through the streets and adorned with garlands of flowers. There were chariot races, which connects us to a whole bunch of our traditional Western European and Irish and Celtic Lughnasadh funeral games that are happening. etc., etc., etc. Very, very old festival. There were also sacrifices to Consus in July, and a lot of the feasts dedicated to this deity are also related to the goddess Ops, like the Ops Concevia and Opalia, and Ops, of course, being sort of the embodiment of grain and the grain harvests. Okay. And last but not least, also on this day, we have August Monday from our Caribbean friends and ancestors. And this is the Monday kicking off the Carnival season for our Caribbean friends. Carnival not celebrated at the same time of year all around the planet. The big ones that a lot of us know about here in the Western world happen late January, February, somewhere in there because they're connected to the Lenten cycle from our Catholic friends and ancestors. But the Caribbean is on its own calendar. They're doing shit their own way down there. And nobody's going to tell them different. Let me tell you that right now. All right. So, that's it. That's our week. That's what we're talking about. That's what we got going on. So to briefly go back over the astrology of this week, August the 1st, Lughnasadh, we have a beautiful, gigantic, full sturgeon moon at 9 degrees of Aquarius. We also have Mars in Virgo trine Jupiter in Taurus at 13 degrees, and Mercury in Virgo opposed Saturn retrograde in Pisces at 5 degrees. Wednesday the 2nd, the moon pops into Pisces. Thursday the 3rd, nothing. Friday the 4th, we have our disseminating moon at 27 degrees of Pisces, and then the moon pops into Aries. Saturday the 5th, nothing. And Sunday the 6th, we have the sun in Leo square Jupiter in Taurus at 14 degrees. And that, my friend, is our astrology for the week. Those are our holy days for this week. And what have we got to round it out? For tarot this week, I encourage you to hang out with the Six of Wands. Why? Because it is connected first off to uh, Jupiter in Leo. And we have two big astro moments featuring Jupiter this week. So that part felt appropriate. But also because in the Six of Wands, we have power, we have joy, we have sorrow, all kind of mixed together. And there's, maybe a little weirdness in the background too with that card. um, but I think that it really exemplifies the energy of this week astrologically, as well as taking into account all of our various holy days and festivals that we're working with. This is mostly a week of celebration, but there is some level of, responsibility and thinking about how we wield our power and how we wield the gifts and our abundance and what issues might come up for us with that stuff, right? With that Pisces moon, all of that good stuff. So, the Six of Wands is our helper this week for tarot. For our witchcraft, Lughnasadh, baby. Build your Lughnasadh altar, have some parties, hang out with friends, do all the good shit and get it in there. Look through the workbook, the Lughnasadh workbook, for even more suggestions on what you might do. But enjoy some Lughnasadh energy. The entire week is appropriate, as we often talk about here on the podcast and in the classes. When am I supposed to celebrate the Sabbath? Whenever the fuck you want to celebrate it. Do it on the day that the Llewellyn book tells you. Do it on the day your ancient ancestors were doing it. Do it on a day that makes sense to the culture that you're in or the work schedule that you have. You have this entire week. We have the modern traditional date of August 1st, and we also have the very ancient traditional date of August 7th, all in this same lunar week. We have a beautiful full moon that is in alignment with ancient and modern festivals. So, baby, have at it. Go for it. And your journal prompts for this week come directly out of the Lughnasadh workbook, and here they are. We also talk about this in the class. What have you sown this year so far? What results can you begin to harvest from your efforts? What loose ends or toxic situations need to be dealt with? And can you do it in a positive and optimistic way? And can you anticipate what is coming in this harvest? Go lay on the earth and listen closely. What does she say? Blessed Lunasa, my heathens, my witches, my pagans. Thank you so much for joining me here on the weekly podcast. And thank you for joining me in these classes. I have been teaching these classes publicly for, well, we are starting the 9th cycle this year with this Lunasa class. So this is coming up on 9 years, 8 years for me of doing this. So thank you so much for being here with me through all of its many iterations, and who knows what magical forms it will take in the future. Let's find out together. Blessed be.